If you want to know how a psychopath can operate in the real world, look no further than UFC fighter Jon Jones. This guy's got a lot of demons, man. A lot of demons. Are you a good guy trying to be bad, or are you a bad guy trying to be good? Good question. Albuquerque police are still looking for UFC champ Jon "Bones" Jones for a hit-and-run crash that happened yesterday. "I think I am a bad guy that's trying to be good," he once said. This duality in his character raises questions about his true nature. The events in his life are nothing short of fascinating. Jones is dedicated to becoming the best fighter on earth, and he is the youngest champion in UFC history. Yet, he displays a complete incapability to maintain order in his normal life. His darkness is definitely something that needs to be studied. Before we delve into the darker chapters of Jon Jones's life, it's important to understand his roots and where it all began. Jon was born into a family steeped in athletic prowess. His older brother, Arthur, and younger brother, Chandler, both made careers in the NFL, achieving notable success in professional football. Meanwhile, Jon took a different path, pursuing mixed martial arts. Athleticism and competition were called to the Jones family, but each sibling found a unique way to channel their talents. Growing up in a religious household with a pastor for a father, Jon was instilled with traditional values and a sense of discipline from a young age. His family emphasized the importance of faith and moral principles, aiming to guide him and his siblings in the right direction. However, life wasn't free from tragedy. His older sister, Carmen, passed away after a long battle with cancer. This loss was devastating for Jon and may have contributed to his inner turmoil and search for meaning. This tragic event left a lasting mark on Jon, who, as a teenager, sought purpose and direction in life. During this period of soul-searching, he discovered mixed martial arts, a discipline that would become his life's calling. Driven by fierce determination, Jon set his sights on becoming a fighter, honing his skills with unmatched focus and intensity. Though his story would later be littered with controversy, Jon's extreme talent and unrelenting drive were nothing short of superior. In his early years, he trained tirelessly, often sacrificing typical teenage pursuits for long hours in the gym, laser-focused on one goal: to be the best. When Jon first walked into the camp, he was an eager student, wanting to learn and become the guy everyone looked up to. By the age of 23, he had achieved what many could only aspire to, becoming the youngest champion in UFC history. This was not just a personal victory but a moment that made history in the sport. However, with this unprecedented success came fame, and perhaps too soon. Sudden stardom and success, especially at such a young age, can contribute to what some would term a complex. For someone as young and exceptionally talented as Jones, this swift rise to fame distorted the boundaries that ground most people. According to psychologists, excessive validation, especially at a formative age, can distort one's self-image. In Jon's case, constant praise and attention may have led him to feel as though the rules didn't apply to him, creating a powerful sense of entitlement and narcissism. It's common for young athletes in Jon's position to develop a distorted reality where everything revolves around their talent and image. When young individuals achieve such monumental success, they often become isolated in an echo chamber where everyone tells them they're the best. This type of environment reinforces their self-belief to the point where they start to feel invincible. Fame amplifies this effect, with people in their orbit praising them, handling their problems, and sometimes even bending the rules on their behalf. For someone as young as Jon, these messages became a reality that clouded judgment and encouraged reckless behavior. Psychologically, there's also an element of brain development. Research shows that the human brain continues maturing well into one's mid-20s, particularly in areas related to decision-making and impulse control. For young champions like Jon, navigating fame without a fully developed sense of long-term consequences can be dangerous. Unfortunately, Jon didn't have the proper support systems to manage these pressures healthily. With fame and fortune constantly fueling his lifestyle, he began to develop unhealthy coping mechanisms, eventually entangling his career with bouts of substance abuse and legal troubles. Jon's struggles with substance use can be traced back to his college years when he started drinking to manage his anxiety. He admitted, "I always felt like I needed alcohol to be cool, to conquer anxiety." His relationship with alcohol became unhealthy, transitioning from high school partying to coping with the pressures of fame. Initially, alcohol may have seemed like a solution, a quick way to escape the pressures he faced. However, as Jon's success in the UFC grew, his drinking habits expanded to include different types of drugs, creating a cycle that became harder to control. This tendency to rely on substances as a form of relief is not uncommon among high-performing individuals. For many, reaching the pinnacle of success brings immense pressure, and without healthy outlets, they may turn to self-destructive habits that threaten to unravel their achievements. There's a psychological phenomenon at play here, one seen in many successful individuals: the tendency towards self-destruction after reaching a point of accomplishment through hard work and discipline. Some people start to feel they've earned the right to indulge in potentially damaging habits, whether through overeating, excessive partying, substance use, or other forms of escapism. Jon's pattern of drinking and drug use became a temporary escape between bouts of intense training and competition. However, soon this inability to curb these behaviors threatened his career and reputation. After his championship win in March 2011, it took just over a year for the first major incident to occur. In May 2012, Jon crashed his Bentley into a pole while driving under the influence. He was fined $1,000 and received a 6-month driving suspension. This incident marked the beginning of a pattern of legal and personal challenges that would follow him in the years to come. By January 2015, Jon faced off against his biggest career rival, Daniel Cormier, in a highly anticipated fight. Jon won, but it was revealed 3 days later that he had tested positive for cocaine before the bout. However, since this drug test was concluded over 30 days prior to the fight, the result didn't impact the official outcome, and Jon's victory stood. Yet, public scrutiny intensified. In an effort to address the issue, Jon checked himself into a rehab facility, but this commitment was short-lived. His mere admission revealed that he left the facility after just one night, underscoring his ongoing struggle to confront his substance abuse. These incidents highlight the complexities of addiction. Many individuals turn to substances to mask deep-seated anxieties, escape stress, or fill emotional voids. For Jon, this cycle of relief followed by guilt and self-doubt manifested as cognitive dissonance, a psychological state where one's actions conflict with their values and beliefs, creating a profound sense of inner turmoil. Jon publicly valued hard work, discipline, and dedication, yet his substance use contradicted those values. Every relapse likely deepened his inner conflict, feeding a cycle that often leads to more self-destructive behavior. He would later claim that he wasn't a regular cocaine user but had simply been caught slipping. Jon remarked, "Look at that in your eyes. I don't like coke. I'm not a coke guy. I tried cocaine one night, and the athletic commission is there the next day. How in the world did this just go down?" According to Jon, his drug use wasn't habitual, he was influenced by the party environment and tried cocaine out of curiosity. However, this tendency to indulge in reckless behavior in social settings was a dangerous pattern that ultimately led to even bigger problems. After a night of partying and drinking, the biggest controversy of his life ensued. When asked about his biggest regret, Jon stated, "My biggest regret out of everything was hitting the pregnant woman in that hit-and-run car accident." In 2015, things would take a darker turn. Following a night of partying, he ran a red light and crashed into another vehicle, which then collided with a third vehicle. In a state of panic, he immediately fled the scene. Police were still looking for UFC champ Jon Jones for a hit-and-run crash that happened yesterday. "I realized I wasn't hurt, so I think subconsciously I just figured, all right, nobody's gotten hurt. I'm not hurt, maybe we didn't hit that hard," Jon recounted. He only worried about how bad it would look on him if law enforcement came and smelled the alcohol on him, assuming that since he was okay, the other parties involved were too. In reality, the woman he hit was pregnant. Luckily, she didn't suffer any fatal injuries, but that wouldn't have been to Jon's knowledge at the time. Even when questioned about how he felt after hearing about the pregnant woman he hit, self-centeredness prevailed. "I started thinking about the fact that I could go to jail for the rest of my life. I was miserable. I was extremely depressed," he said, focusing on his own freedom rather than expressing remorse for the victim. This incident showcases Jon's narcissistic traits, self-centeredness, and lack of empathy. To make it to the top of industries like sports or business, arrogance is often needed, and arrogance breeds narcissism. Jon Jones, having to ensure the UFC world centers around him and his success as a fighter, may have slipped into a mindset where he believes it's all about him. The same entitlement and strong ego stood out in moments like this. Jon turned himself into authorities the following day and was released on $2,500 bail. Subsequently, the UFC stripped him of his light heavyweight title and suspended him indefinitely. This entire scenario reflects what psychologists call moral disengagement, a state where one's mind rationalizes harmful actions to protect self-image. This allows a person to detach from the morality of their actions, justifying their behavior to avoid facing guilt. For Jon, his success may have fed his sense of invincibility, making accountability a foreign concept. This mindset enabled him to flee the scene to protect himself. Although this was one of his lowest points, he vowed to change his behavior. However, Jon Jones would continue to be seen as a villain. One of the most notorious rivalries in UFC history was between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. Their verbal sparring became as iconic as their physical clashes in the ring, but for Jones, the rivalry seemed to fulfill something deeper, a need to dominate his opponent, not just physically but psychologically. While trash talk is common and necessary in combat sports to sell tickets, there seemed to be more to it in Jon's case. Daniel Cormier was Jon's most skilled opponent, and Jon may have had a genuine fear of losing to him. This fear could have driven him to dominate Cormier psychologically. At the time, Cormier was in a better life position, with a family and no legal troubles, fitting into a role model persona that Jon couldn't fulfill. This disparity caused Jon to reach into his arrogant side, boasting about his wealth and success. The rivalry reached a boiling point with Cormier's pointed remarks, triggering Jon's darker tendencies. Jon's need to be the best at all costs was a central theme in his life and ultimately his downfall. He became known as a chameleon, able to change for the cameras while being different in private. Despite vows to change, things continued to worsen. Jon's issues with substance abuse persisted. After being banned for performance-enhancing drug use, he was arrested again for driving under the influence. His recurring issues with alcohol and vehicles showcased his inability to prevent himself from falling back into destructive patterns. In a particularly troubling incident, Jon was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. However, on the same night of this accomplishment, police were called to his home for a domestic violence incident involving his fiancée. Jon had celebrated by heading to a strip club with $10,000 in cash before returning home drunk and assaulting her in front of their children. When police arrived, Jon displayed a level of self-victimization and deflection, making it hard to feel sympathy for him. He claimed, "It's because I'm black," attempting to shift the narrative away from his actions. This incident marked a critical point in Jon's story, delving into traits associated with psychopathy, such as impulsivity, disregard for consequences, and manipulation. While psychopathy is not a clinical diagnosis for Jon, his behavior fits certain patterns, including a lack of empathy and poor impulse control. His outburst about race showcased his deflection, an attempt to evade responsibility by shifting the focus away from his actions. Jon Jones's story serves as a study in contrast, the athlete who reached legendary heights but was weighed down by his own dark psychology. His tale warns of what happens when talent meets unchecked ego and unresolved demons. Ultimately, the dark psychology of Jon Jones is a reminder that fame and talent can come with a steep price, one that few can afford to pay.